Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Schabert. I created this podcast to leverage 12 years of osteopathic medical training and over a decade of experience in primary care medicine to help sort through the confusing and often contradictory health information found on the internet. I want to distill all this information down into a form that you can use every day to optimize your health as you move forward through life. So if you are looking to get to life's finish line with the ability to do all the things that you love intact, then this podcast is for you. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button and throw us a like as well. I'd also love it if you would share this episode with people in your life who you believe can benefit from it. It really helps us get this information out to more people. With all that said, let's move on with today's episode. Welcome to the latest episode of the Human Momentum Podcast. Today, I have some exciting news that the channel has hit a new milestone. We just got our 500th subscriber a little bit earlier this week, so I want to thank all of you that have tuned in and made that possible as I continue to strive to move towards making this a significant source of income for myself and something that I can devote more of a full-time presence into. Today, I want to continue my series highlighting other health science podcasts with high-quality health and medical information. In this episode, we're going to check in with the Nutrition Made Simple podcast and its host, Dr. Gil Carvalho. He's an MD with a wealth of nutritional knowledge and a real interest in going through nutritional literature and relating that to everyone. I like this particular episode because it does a wonderful job really explaining one of the primary modifiable causes of heart disease and touches on a second of the three primary causes. The title of this video is The True Causes of Heart Disease, and truthfully, I'm only going to really be going into the modifiable causes in a fair amount of detail, but Dr. Carvalho does touch on lipoproteins, cholesterol, and insulin resistance in his video and does a really good job kind of explaining where the science is today in a way that the average person can understand. But before we get started, I want to ask you about your experience with physicians in your area. I'm really curious if you've ever had a doctor sit down with you and go over your lab results with regards to cholesterol and blood sugars and explain them in a way that you understood so that you knew the kind of things that you could do at home to positively impact those results and exactly where you were sitting. Were your doctors really general in saying, oh, it's good, or we got a little bit to work on, or were they really kind of going down and explaining what's going on with different forms of cholesterol? And were they using outdated terms like good and bad cholesterol as well? I'm really curious. If you can let me know in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. All right, with that in mind, let's check out this clip from Dr. Gil Carvalho and Nutrition Made Simple.
So that's also true. But many people have high cholesterol and don't have heart disease, and many have heart disease with normal cholesterol. So how's that possible? Well, what almost never gets explained is how the cholesterol ends up inside the artery wall. Cholesterol is carried by microscopic vehicles that float around in our bloodstream, and it's those vehicles that carry it across the artery wall. When we have too many of these vehicles in circulation, they cross into the artery wall more often, they get stuck in there, and plaque grows, even if cholesterol level is completely normal. So you see how the tunnel vision on the level of cholesterol can be fatal because it misses this key distinction and this mismatch with the actual number of vehicles. And this mismatch, where the cholesterol level is normal, but the number of vehicles is high, is incredibly common. We're not splitting hairs here. In some populations, we see it in 70 to 75% of people. What causes this problem is our diet. Refined grains, purified added sugars, soda, alcohol, junk food.
I really love this clip because it brings up some truly important concepts with regards to understanding plaque formation, heart attack, and stroke risk. First off, even though those plaques are made out of cholesterol, it's not the amount of cholesterol that determines whether or not you get plaques. It actually has a lot more to do with the vehicles that carry them. If you're wondering why we have to have these vehicles at all, it's because cholesterol is fat. And if you've ever tried to dissolve oil or butter in water, you know fat doesn't mix with water, and our blood is essentially water. We need cholesterol in all of our cells for a number of functions, including health of our cell membranes. Cholesterol is a component of a lot of essential parts of our human cells. So we need to be able to deliver it from where it's manufactured in the liver to each of the cells throughout our body. And it's these vehicles that allow our human body to transport cholesterol where it's needed. But it turns out if we've got too many or the wrong types of vehicles, that some of that cholesterol ends up in our artery walls instead of where it's supposed to go. Okay, understanding that, the next concept that's important to understand is that, as Dr. Carvalho says, in a large number of people, the number and types of vehicles doesn't really track with the level of cholesterol. So while we're measuring HDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and total cholesterol, that may not necessarily tell us whether or not someone is at risk for developing these plaques and eventually having unstable plaques that cause heart attacks and strokes. It's really by measuring the levels of vehicles themselves that we can get a better idea of it. There is a way to use cholesterol measurements to estimate what's going on with the vehicles, and Dr. Carvalho will get into that in a little bit later clip. I'm also going to go through all the labs that you need to check in order to get a very firm idea of what your cardiovascular risk is at the end of this video. So please do watch through to the end, and I'll have all that information for you. With that in mind, let's take a look at the next clip where Dr. Carvalho talks a little bit about some really important research that was a big departure from some of what I learned in medical school with regards to dietary interventions and the effect that that can have on arterial plaque.
One randomized control trial had people limit commercial bakery products and sweets and pastries to once a week maximum, and also favor whole grains like steel-cut oats or wild rice over refined grains, and also have fresh, unprocessed fruits and vegetables daily. Over time, they saw a reduction in the thickness of the artery wall and the thickness of the plaque itself. This is a very striking result because we normally don't see this in Westerners unless they're on very powerful medication. But it turns out we can actually turn back the clock. We can reverse the problem to some extent by changing our diet. This is such a powerful concept, and yet a lot of doctors still don't realize this is possible. I wasn't taught this in medical school.
I strongly agree with everything that Dr. Carvalho is saying here in this clip. And this knowledge is absolutely essential for preventing and reversing heart disease. This really covers what I think is the driver in many of the people in the United States right now that will go on to have heart attacks and strokes. We see a lot of obesity, a lot of overconsumption of processed grains and processed sugars. So this research looked at the dietary alternative to that, and with a number of interventions that aren't really asking that much of folks, they saw a reversal in the progression of plaques and a reversal in progression to heart disease. This is incredible and is something that I would have thought was impossible when I was in medical training. One of the things we have to understand, though, is that there are folks who are relatively fit, don't have an enlarged midsection, don't eat a lot of processed grains, and don't consume processed sugars, and yet still go on to develop plaques and have heart attacks and strokes. So what's going on with them? This next clip is going to try and answer that question.
They're lean, they have normal triglycerides, normal HDL, but they still have heart disease. Because you can have a normal number of these large vehicles, but there are many other sizes in circulation as well. And any of those are problematic if there's too many of them. You can think of the large vehicles as buses on the road and the smaller vehicles as maybe Ubers on the road, and too many of either kind will cause a traffic jam. These other sizes of vehicles are also determined by our diet, mainly by the types of fats that we eat. Healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil and other liquid vegetable oils, avocados, walnuts, and almonds, different seeds like chia seeds or sesame seeds, and some fermented dairy like unsweetened Greek yogurt and fatty fish. The types of fats in these foods help maintain these vehicles in the normal range.
This clip is fantastic as well. It does a great job of discussing some of the other drivers of heart disease risk not covered by those large vehicles that get pushed up by refined carbohydrate intake. These smaller vehicles can be just as big a problem, and they're going to respond to the types of fats we eat. If you consume too much saturated fat or any trans fat at all, it can push up the number of these smaller vehicles, while consuming polyunsaturated fats like those found in fish and extra virgin olive oil can push down the levels of those types of vehicles. This is something that's I find pretty controversial. There is a large body of health influencers out there, many of whom are physicians, that are fixated on carbohydrates as the only source of heart disease. And they will argue that you can have as much saturated fat as you like and it doesn't cause a problem. But our epidemiologic research simply doesn't support that idea. The study that Dr. Carvalho is about to reference is much more in line with the body of evidence. And this study took a group of individuals who'd already had heart attacks and strokes and had them modify their diet so they're eating more of these healthy poly and monounsaturated fats, and they were avoiding saturated fat and trans fats as much as possible. In those individuals, they saw a 70% reduction in the risk for a second event over individuals who didn't make those kinds of dietary changes. Powerful evidence indeed. So let's look at a clip that discusses that.
In a randomized control trial conducted in France, people who had suffered a heart attack previously were given a diet where the main types of fat in the Western diet were replaced with healthy fats like fish and olive oil or canola, and their risk of dying of heart disease was cut by more than 70%. Okay, how can we tell how many of these vehicles we have in circulation? There is a blood test that can give you that reading. It's called ApoB. It's a measure of the number of these vehicles that can cause heart disease, but you can also estimate that with a formula without spending any money. It's free and it works pretty well. I'll put it down here. You can pause the video and write that down. We also have an entire video going over that in detail, and I'll link that in the description.
More incredibly useful knowledge here. Both the discussion of this study showing this massive risk reduction associated with getting good fats into the diet, along with a way to calculate ApoB, the measure of how many of these vehicles you have, off of a standard cholesterol panel, is great. ApoB can be measured directly by lab, and it's not terribly expensive, only about $20. But I've had former patients telling me that their new primaries don't really want to order it. And I think this is because a lot of doctors that trained in the era I did or before don't really know what to do with ApoB. They know what the target levels for LDL are supposed to be. They don't really know what to do with ApoB. So let me talk about it a little bit. And I'm going to put it up on the screen here, and you can go ahead and write that down. So you'll have an idea when you need to make some lifestyle interventions to try and get these numbers down, to get your risk down. So for somebody who has never had a heart attack or stroke, doesn't have a strong family history, and doesn't have any other major risk factors concerning heart disease, having an ApoB less than 90 milligrams per deciliter is absolutely fine. For somebody who has high blood pressure, or they're starting to have early insulin resistance, or they just have a strong family history of heart disease, I would target a level under 80 milligrams per deciliter. For individuals who have known plaques in their arteries or they've had a previous heart attack or stroke, you want to get it below 70. And there's a lot of thought now, if you're somebody who's in that risk category, that even pushing the ApoB below 60 milligrams per deciliter is a good idea. All right. So in our last clip that Dr. Carvalho is going to go over, we want to look at the last kind of lipoprotein other than ApoB that can affect your risk of heart attack or stroke. It would also affect our target levels of ApoB. If you're talking about people who should be looking to get that ApoB target below 60 milligrams per deciliter, they're people that have a higher than ideal LP little a. So let's look at that.
Well, we need to talk about the nastiest type of these vehicles, a small subcategory called LP little a. And this is another big piece of the puzzle because 1 in 5 people have a high concentration of these vehicles. And it's genetically determined. It runs in families. It runs in my family. And often what you'll see is in a family where people have heart attacks at a young age, in their 30s, in their 40s, they don't have diabetes, they don't have high blood pressure, their cholesterol isn't that high, and yet they have these massive heart attacks at a young age and they just drop dead. Often that comes down to high LP little a. Now, there's nothing currently that brings a high LP little a down to the normal range. There are therapies being studied. Right now, what we do is we try to control everything else.
So LP little a is something that's important to understand. As Dr. Carvalho stated, this isn't something that is much influenced by diet, exercise, or medications. We do have some medications in development that may one day allow us to lower the level of LP little a. But for now, we don't really have a lot that affects it. What we do in individuals with elevated LP little a, as Dr. Carvalho said, is we try and control everything else. So what is everything else? First off, ApoB. Hitting those lowest targets of ApoB, vitally important for individuals that have a high LP little a. Also, making sure you don't have rampant intravascular inflammation. Check a lab called a high sensitivity CRP. You can see it on the screen right now. Write it down if you want to know it. Reducing this is going to be done by doing the things that reduce the large and small ApoB vehicles. So consuming healthy fats, making sure you're eating whole grains, a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. Also exercising regularly helps reduce inflammation. Both resistance training and cardiovascular exercise are important. If you can do both of those things together, they're way more powerful than either one is by themselves. Making sure that you don't have a lot of fat around the middle, also vitally important. All right. So the last thing that you really need to control is your blood pressure. What we're realizing now is a top number that's out of the ones or a bottom number that's into the 80s is problematic. And it's particularly problematic if you have that elevated LP little a. The excessive blood pressure we're finding, at least we think this is the case, it's going to push more of those vehicles through the artery walls and allow more plaques to form and become inflamed and rupture, and you get the story. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about is how you can determine if you have healthy blood sugar metabolism, because this is something that will be profoundly affected by eating the kinds of diets we talked about in that much earlier clip about the artery walls getting less thick, plaques regressing. That whole grain, fresh fruit and vegetable diet helps a ton with reducing insulin resistance. The way you can calculate it, though, is with this formula that I'm going to put up on the screen here. It's getting a fasting insulin level and a fasting blood sugar level. And then using this formula, you take your fasting insulin, multiply it by your fasting glucose, and the number you get, if that number is below 1, you have normal insulin sensitivity. That's fabulous. If you have a number between 1 and 1.9, that means you're into early insulin resistance. And a number of 1.9 or higher is an indication of diabetes. This number is going to turn abnormal long before fasting blood sugar or a hemoglobin A1C will get abnormal. So it's a powerful tool for tracking if you're on the way to getting insulin resistance. And there's a lot of people who are thin but aren't very active and consume a little bit too much in the way of refined grains and processed sugars that will come back with an elevation in this number. So it's great stuff to know. Let me know if you need more information on other testing or anything else related to this topic. I very much want to get anything out there that you need. So this concludes the latest edition of the Human Momentum Podcast. If you found this helpful and informative, please do subscribe to the channel if it's your first time. If not, make sure you throw a like on the video and share it with somebody you know that needs this information. Thank you so much for watching and help me hit that 500 subscription metric. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video.